Once upon a time, in a small village in Nigeria, there lived a girl named Adaobi. Adaobi was a bright and lively child, but she always found herself in trouble. She loved playing in the rain, running through the market barefoot, and climbing trees to pick mangoes. Her mother, Mama Ejim, often scolded her. "Adaobi," Mama Ejim would shout, "come down from that tree before you break your leg. Girls like you should be helping in the kitchen, not climbing like a monkey." But Adaobi didn't listen. She loved being free and doing things her own way. As she grew older, her actions began to upset her mother even more. Adaobi would skip important family gatherings, talk back to elders. In their village, tradition was everything. Girls were expected to be respectful, humble, and obedient. They were taught to value family and to marry young, bringing honor to their parents. But Adaobi didn't seem to care. When the village elders would call meetings to discuss important matters, Adaobi would slip away to the riverbank, where she would daydream for hours or write her own stories on banana leaves. Mama Ejim was growing more frustrated by the day. The other women in the village began whispering behind her back. "Ah, this Adaobi, she will bring disgrace to her family," one woman said. "How can a girl be so stubborn?" another added. "Poor Ejim. She must be so ashamed." Mama Ejim felt the sting of their words like a slap on her face. She would go home, her anger bubbling inside her like hot oil. "Adaobi," she would scream, "do you hear what people are saying about us? Do you know how much shame you are bringing to this family?" But Adaobi would shrug. "Mama, I don't care what they say. Let them talk. It's my life." This only made Mama Ejim angrier. "Your life? Huh. What life? You are my daughter, and you will do as I say." Things got worse when suitors began to visit their home. Adaobi was now a young woman, and many men were interested in marrying her. One day, a wealthy cocoa farmer named Emeka came to their house. He was older than Adaobi, with a large belly and a booming voice. "I have heard of your daughter's beauty," Emeka said, smiling widely. "I will take good care of her. She will never lack anything." Mama Ejim was thrilled. Emeka was rich and respected in the village. But when she called Adaobi to greet him, Adaobi frowned. "I will not marry him," she said bluntly. "He's old enough to be my father." "Are you mad?" Mama Ejim hissed. "Do you know how lucky you are? Emeka is a good man." "I don't care," Adaobi replied. "I want to marry someone I love, not someone you choose for me." Emeka left angrily, and Mama Ejim was humiliated. After that day, no other suitor dared to come to their home. News of Adaobi's stubbornness had spread far and wide. As the months went by, the tension between mother and daughter grew unbearable. One fateful day, during a big family celebration, Adaobi refused to help serve food to the guests. Instead, she sat under a tree reading a book. When Mama Ejim saw her, she exploded with anger. "Adaobi, how do you sit there while everyone else is working? You're the first daughter. You should be setting an example." "Why should I?" Adaobi replied, looking up from her book. "I didn't ask for this celebration. If you want to impress people, do it yourself." Gasps filled the air as the guests stared in shock. Mama Ejim's face turned red with shame. Unable to control her rage, she grabbed Adaobi's arm and dragged her inside the house. "You are a disgrace," she shouted. "No daughter of mine behaves like this, and no mother of mine tells me how to live my life." Adaobi shot back. Her words stung like a whip. In that moment, something inside Mama Ejim snapped. Years of frustration, anger, and embarrassment came pouring out of her. Without thinking, she screamed, "Adaobi, may you never know true happiness if you keep bringing shame to this family." The room went silent. Even Adaobi froze, shocked by her mother's words. But instead of apologizing, she laughed bitterly. "Fine, Mama. Curse me if you want. I don't care." She stormed out of the house, leaving her mother standing there, trembling. For days, Mama Ejim regretted what she had said, but her pride wouldn't let her call Adaobi back. Meanwhile, Adaobi packed her things and left the village for good. She was determined to prove her mother wrong and live the life she wanted. Years later, Adaobi had built the life she had dreamed of, Her name became famous in the city she had moved to. She was a sharp, confident woman who had worked her way to the top. She owned a successful clothing business, designing beautiful outfits that even the wealthiest women in the city adored. Her face often appeared in magazines, and her name was whispered with admiration in high society. Adaobi had married a man she loved, Ikenna, a gentle and supportive husband. They had 2 children, little Chisholm and her elder brother, Ibube. To outsiders, Adaobi seemed to have everything: a thriving business, a beautiful family, and a luxurious life. But deep inside, Adaobi felt an emptiness she couldn't explain. On sleepless nights, she would stare at the ceiling, her chest heavy with a sadness she didn't understand. She dismissed it as stress from work or the pressures of being a wife and mother. But the feeling never went away. Then, strange things began to happen. First, one of her largest business deals fell through without warning. A partner she had trusted suddenly turned against her, accusing her of fraud. Although she was innocent, the scandal cost her millions and tarnished her reputation. Next, her husband, Ikenna, who had always been her rock, started to grow distant. He spent more time at work and less time with the family. They argued over small things, and Adaobi began to feel alone in her marriage. The worst came when her youngest child, Chisholm, fell ill. What started as a simple fever turned into something more serious. Adaobi and Ikenna took her to the best hospitals, but the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. Chisholm grew weaker by the day, and Adaobi's heart broke as she watched her once lively daughter fade before her eyes. One evening, as Adaobi sat by Chisholm's hospital bed, tears streaming down her face, she began to think about her life. Despite all her success, nothing ever seemed to go smoothly for her. Every time she achieved something, it was followed by pain or loss. It was as if something invisible was holding her back from truly being happy. That night, she had a dream. She was standing in a dark forest, surrounded by whispers. The voices grew louder and louder until she could make out what they were saying. Curse, the curse, the curse. Adaobi woke up in a cold sweat. Her heart was racing, and her hands trembled. The word curse echoed in her mind. Could it be? Could her mother's words from so many years ago still have power over her? Determined to find answers, Adaobi began to visit spiritual guides. She went from church to church, meeting with pastors and prayer warriors. She even visited a few traditional healers, desperate for any insight into what was happening in her life. One day, an old priestess named Neka listened carefully to Adaobi's story. Neka was frail and wrinkled, with eyes that seemed to see into Adaobi's soul. "My child," Neka said softly, "your pain is not ordinary. It is the result of words spoken in anger. Words can be like seeds. When planted in the soil of a person's life, they grow and bear fruit. Your mother's curse is the seed, and the fruit is the sorrow you feel." Adaobi's heart sank. She had always believed curses were just stories, something old people used to scare children. But now, the weight of Neka's words felt real. "What do I do, Mama?" Adaobi asked, her voice shaking. Neka sighed deeply. "A curse spoken by a mother is powerful, but it is not unbreakable. You must return to your roots. You must seek forgiveness from the one who cursed you. Only then will you be free." Adaobi's chest tightened. She hadn't spoken to her mother in years. She had left the village without looking back, refusing to acknowledge the family she felt had never understood her. The thought of returning filled her with dread. What if her mother didn't forgive her? What if it was too late? But Adaobi also knew she had no choice. If there was even a chance of saving her daughter and lifting the shadow over her life, she had to face her past. The next morning, Adaobi began packing her bags. She called Ikenna and told him she was going to the village. He didn't understand why, but he saw the desperation in her eyes and didn't question her. With little Chisholm still in the hospital, Adaobi kissed her daughter's forehead and promised to come back with answers. As the car drove through the winding roads leading to her village, memories of her childhood began to flood Adaobi's mind. The mango trees she used to climb, the dusty market streets, and most of all, her mother's stern face. For the first time in years, Adaobi felt like the little girl who had run away from everything. When the car finally stopped in front of her family's old house, Adaobi hesitated. Her hands were trembling as she stepped out. The house looked smaller than she remembered, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. Taking a deep breath, she walked to the door and knocked. Adaobi stood at the door, her heart pounding as if it wanted to leap out of her chest. The door creaked open, and there stood her mother, Mama Ajim. Time had softened her face, but not her stern gaze. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw Adaobi, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "Mama," Adaobi finally said, her voice trembling. "I've come to see you." Mama Ajim frowned, but stepped aside to let her in. The house smelled of spices and old wood, just as Adaobi remembered. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of years of separation hanging between them. "What brings you back here after all this time?" Mama Ajim asked, her tone sharp. Adaobi swallowed hard. "Mama, I need your forgiveness." Mama Ajim raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Forgiveness? For what?" "For leaving the way I did, for disobeying you, for everything." "And, Mama," Adaobi hesitated, tears welling in her eyes, "for the curse you placed on me. My life has been filled with sorrow, and my child, Chisholm, is very sick. Please, Mama, lift the curse. I beg you." Mama Ajim stared at her daughter, the pain of years etched into the lines of her face. Her lips quivered as she struggled to find the words. For a long time, she remained silent, her eyes shifting between Adaobi's face and the ground. Then, with a deep sigh, she spoke. "Adaobi," she began softly, her voice trembling. "Do you know how much pain you caused me? Watching you walk away from this house, from the family that loved you, broke my heart into pieces. And yet, in my anger, I said words I should never have spoken. I let my pride and hurt guide me." Adaobi's tears flowed freely now. "Mama, I know I hurt you. I was young and foolish, thinking I knew everything. But I'm not that person anymore. I've come back because I need you, Mama. I need your forgiveness, and I need your blessing." Mama Ajim looked into Adaobi's eyes, and the hardness that had been there for years began to melt. She reached out and placed her hand on Adaobi's head, just as she had done when Adaobi was a little girl. "My daughter," she said, her voice breaking, "I forgive you. I forgive you with all my heart. And I take back every curse I spoke over you. May blessings follow you from this day forward." Adaobi let out a sob, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered. "Thank you." Mama Ajim pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, and for the first time in years, they both felt the warmth of love that had been buried under anger and pride. The bond between mother and daughter, though strained, had never truly been broken. That evening, the two women sat together under the stars, talking about the past, sharing stories, and laughing softly. Mama Ajim cooked Adaobi's favorite meal, yam porridge with smoked fish, and they ate together, just like old times. For the first time in years, Adaobi felt at peace. Before Adaobi left the next morning, Mama Ajim walked her to the edge of the village. She placed her hands on Adaobi's shoulders and said, "Go back to your family, Adaobi. Love them deeply and cherish every moment. And never forget where you come from. The strength of your roots will always carry you." When Adaobi returned to the city, she felt a change in her spirit. She visited Chisholm in the hospital and was overjoyed to find her daughter sitting up, smiling, and asking for food. The doctors were amazed at her sudden recovery, but Adaobi knew in her heart what had happened. Over the following months, Adaobi's life began to blossom. Her business flourished once again, her relationship with Ikenna grew stronger, and her family was filled with laughter and love. She made it a point to visit her mother often, bringing her grandchildren along so they could learn about their heritage. Adaobi also became an advocate for kindness and forgiveness. She often shared her story with others, teaching them the importance of healing wounds, no matter how deep they seemed. Moral lesson: words are powerful, they can heal or harm, bless or curse. As parents, we must choose our words carefully, for they have the power to shape the lives of our children. As children, we must honor and respect our parents, even when we don't always agree with them. The story teaches us that forgiveness is not just about letting go of anger. It is about restoring love and harmony. No matter how broken a relationship may seem, humility, love, and forgiveness can mend even the deepest wounds, bringing peace and blessings into our lives. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed our story. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.